In 2001, Enron was named the most innovative company in America for the 6th year in a row. It was worth $70 billion. It employed 20,000 people. 15 months later, it was gone, the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history at the time. Employees watched their retirement savings evaporate in a matter of weeks. And here's the strange part. For years, Enron had been reporting enormous profits on money it had never actually received. Not stolen money, not hidden money, money that simply did not exist yet. This is how the most admired company in the world turned out to be a very expensive illusion, and how almost everyone whose job was to stop it decided not to. It started in 1985, when two fairly boring pipeline companies merged. That was it. Enron moved natural gas through pipes. It was about as exciting as a utility bill. The man in charge was Kenneth, a former government economist with a PhD and a reputation as one of the best-connected businessmen in Texas. Lay had a bigger idea. Instead of only moving gas through pipes, what if Enron could buy and sell gas itself, like a stock? What if energy could be traded the way Wall Street traded shares? It sounds obvious now. At the time, it was genuinely revolutionary. Enron built the first real marketplace for energy, and for a while, it worked brilliantly. Then Enron went further. If you could trade energy, why not trade everything? Enron started building markets for electricity, for water, for internet bandwidth, even for the weather. On paper, Enron was transforming from a pipeline company into something closer to an investment bank that could trade absolutely anything. Wall Street loved it. Between 1990 and 2000, Enron's stock rose more than 1,500%. By the late 90s, Enron wasn't just successful, it was worshipped. Business schools taught its strategy. Its executives were treated like visionaries. The company built a gleaming headquarters in Houston, hired the smartest graduates it could find, and paid them enormous bonuses. Inside, the culture was ferocious. Enron used a system employees called rank and yank. Every 6 months, workers were graded against each other, and the bottom 15% were fired. Not the bottom 15% of people who were failing, the bottom 15% of everyone, no matter how well the whole team had actually done. The result was exactly what you would expect. Employees learned very quickly that reporting bad numbers was dangerous, and reporting spectacular numbers was how you survived. Nobody wanted to be the person who admitted a deal wasn't working, so nobody was. The man who designed much of this system was Jeffrey Skilling, a former consultant who joined Enron in 1990 and became its most powerful executive. Skilling was brilliant, relentless, and completely convinced that traditional accounting was for people who didn't understand the future. He was about to prove it, with a single change to how Enron counted money. Normally, when a company signs a long-term deal, it records the money as it actually comes in. If you agree to supply gas for 20 years, you count that revenue year by year as you earn it. That's how almost every business on Earth works. Skilling wanted something different. He convinced regulators to let Enron use something called mark-to-market accounting. Under mark-to-market, Enron didn't have to wait. The moment it signed a 20-year deal, it could estimate how much profit that deal would eventually produce, and record all of it immediately as profit today. Read that again because it is the entire scheme. Enron could book profits on money it had not received, from deals that had not happened yet based on its own predictions about the future. And who decided what those future profits would be? Enron did. If a deal was projected to earn $50 million over 20 years, Enron could put $50 million on its books this quarter. If the deal actually lost money later, that was a problem for a future quarter and a future version of the company. And there was a trap built into it that nobody talked about. Once you have already booked every future profit from a deal, that deal can never make you money again. To keep growing, Enron had to sign bigger and bigger deals, forever. All those deals required enormous amounts of borrowed money, and debt sitting on the balance sheet would scare investors and hurt the share price. So Enron needed somewhere to put it. This is where Andrew Fastow comes in. Fastow was Enron's chief financial officer, and his solution was elegant, complicated, and deeply illegal. Fastow created hundreds of separate companies, partnerships with names like LJM and Chuco that existed almost entirely on paper. Enron would move its debt and its failing assets into these partnerships. Because the partnerships were technically separate entities, that debt vanished from Enron's books. From the outside, Enron looked healthy and almost debt-free. In reality, the debt hadn't gone anywhere at all. It was just standing in the next room. But there was one more problem. These partnerships needed something valuable behind them to convince banks to lend, so Enron backed them with its own stock. Remember that, because it is the decision that eventually destroys the company. It meant Enron's entire hidden structure now depended on one thing: the share price staying high. And Fastow wasn't only hiding debt, he was personally running some of these partnerships, earning tens of millions of dollars on deals he was making with his own employer, sitting on both sides of the same table. Enron's accountants were Arthur Andersen, one of the 5 most respected auditing firms in the world. Andersen was supposed to examine Enron's books and tell the public the truth. But Andersen was also earning tens of millions of dollars a year from Enron in consulting fees, money it would lose if it made Enron unhappy. The Wall Street analysts covering Enron worked for banks that earned enormous fees from Enron's deals. Almost every single person whose job was to ask hard questions had a direct financial reason not to ask them, and the few who did ask were humiliated. When one analyst pressed Skilling on a public conference call in 2001, asking why Enron couldn't produce a basic balance sheet, Skilling insulted him live in front of everyone listening. The message to Wall Street could not have been clearer. Do not question the smartest company in America. By August 2000, Enron's stock reached $90 a share. The company was valued at around $70 billion. On paper, it was one of the largest companies in the United States. Executives were telling their own employees to buy more stock, that it was heading to 200. And almost nobody outside the building knew that the entire structure was now balanced on a single condition, one that could never be allowed to break. The share price could never fall. The first real crack came from a journalist. In March 2001, a Fortune reporter named Bethany McLean published an article with a deceptively simple title, "Is Enron Overpriced?" Her argument wasn't complicated. She had read Enron's public financial filings, and she could not work out how the company actually made money. The documents were dense, vague, and close to impossible to follow. Enron's response was to fly executives to her office to explain, and then to call her editor and question her integrity. A short seller named Jim Chanos had reached the same conclusion months earlier and was already betting against the stock. Then, in August 2001, Jeffrey Skilling did something nobody expected. After just 6 months as chief executive, the job he had spent his entire career chasing, he resigned, citing personal reasons. Wall Street was baffled. Kenneth Lay stepped back in and assured employees the company had never been in better shape. That same month, an Enron vice president named Sharon Watkins sent Lay a private memo. In it, she wrote that she was incredibly nervous the company would implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She laid out the partnership structure and explained precisely why it was going to fail. Lay had the memo reviewed by the same law firm that had helped create those partnerships. They concluded there was nothing serious to worry about. Then reality arrived. On October 16, 2001, Enron announced a quarterly loss of $618 million and quietly disclosed that it was cutting shareholder equity by more than $1 billion because of Fastow's partnerships. Investors finally started asking what those partnerships actually were. Within 2 weeks, the Securities and Exchange Commission opened a formal investigation. Fastow was fired. And then the trap sprang shut. As the news spread, Enron's share price fell. And because the hidden partnerships were backed by Enron stock, that falling price triggered exactly the collapse the whole structure had been built to prevent. Debt that had been carefully hidden for years came flooding back onto the balance sheet all at once. In early November, Enron admitted it had overstated its profits by $586 million over 4 years. A rival company, Dynegy, agreed to buy Enron in a rescue deal, then looked properly at the books and walked away. On December 2, 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy. The stock, worth $90 a share 16 months earlier, was now worth less than $1. As the investigation closed in, something remarkable was happening inside Arthur Andersen. In the weeks before the firm was formally notified, Andersen employees began destroying Enron documents, shredding paper by the ton, and deleting thousands of emails. When that came out, it ended a firm that had existed for 89 years and employed 85,000 people around the world. Andersen was convicted of obstruction of justice in 2002. The Supreme Court overturned that conviction 3 years later, but by then, it made no difference. The firm was already dead. Around 20,000 Enron employees lost their jobs. Far worse, many of them had their retirement savings tied up in Enron stock. The company had encouraged it for years. And during the critical weeks of the collapse, employees were locked out of their retirement accounts, unable to sell, while the price fell to nothing. Roughly $2 billion in employee pensions vanished. Meanwhile, in the year before the bankruptcy, Enron executives had sold more than $1 billion of their own shares. Kenneth personally sold around $70 million of Enron stock, while telling his employees to keep buying. Ordinary workers in Houston lost their savings, their jobs, and their health insurance in the same week. The reckoning took years. Andrew Fastow cooperated with prosecutors, testified against his bosses, and served roughly 6 years in prison. Jeffrey Skilling was convicted and sentenced to 24 years, later reduced to 14. He was released in 2019. Kenneth was convicted in May 2006 and died of a heart attack that July before he could be sentenced. Because he died before his appeal could be heard, his conviction was legally erased. And in 2002, Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which forced chief executives to personally sign off on their own company's financial statements and made destroying documents during an investigation a crime. Nearly every public company in America still operates under rules written because of Enron. Here's what makes Enron different from a simple robbery. Almost nothing Enron did started out as an outright lie. Mark-to-market accounting was approved by regulators. The partnerships were reviewed by lawyers and signed off by auditors. At every single step, there was a qualified professional saying it was fine. Enron didn't collapse because one person decided to steal. It collapsed because a company built a system where telling the truth was punished, where everyone whose job was to object was being paid by the people they were supposed to be watching, and where a rising share price was treated as proof that nothing could possibly be wrong. The fraud was never hidden in a back room. It was published in public filings that almost nobody could understand, and almost nobody was willing to admit that they couldn't. If you want more true stories behind the biggest money moments in history, subscribe. There are plenty more where this came from.